My name is Kevin McNally. Let's amplify your message on The Kevin McNally Show. Welcome to The Kevin McNally Show. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Today, I'm going to introduce my friend Gus Alexiou. Gus is a London-based journalist specializing in issues affecting people living with physical disabilities. His interest in the subject stems from being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at the age of 26. Since this time, he's written on a number of topics of health, social justice, accessibility for a number of newspapers, including The Times, the Daily Mail, The Guardian, The Independent, The Telegraph, lots of newspapers. Gus has interest in sight enhancement technology and supporting those living with low vision through voice recognition, speech output, and AI. Gus is also a contributor at Forbes, where he writes on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Hello, Gus.
Hello, Kevin.
How are you doing today?
Very, very well, thank you.
I really appreciate you joining me today. I'm glad you could make the time to discuss this issue, which I'll just throw out there. The main issue, the purpose of this episode is about vision loss and how vision loss, yes, it affects every aspect of a person's life, but it does not have to be the end of all passions and interests. There are workarounds for, I would say, most of the passions and interests that people have, even with vision loss. I'm going to quickly just cover the eye so everyone kind of has a baseline understanding, because I believe you have to understand vision before you can understand vision loss. Light enters the front of the eye, goes through the lens, goes through the middle of the eye, hits the retina, is kind of translated into electrical, and goes up the optic nerve into the brain where we see. We see with our brains. We don't really see with our eyes. So different people lose their vision different ways. For example, my vision loss is not in the middle. It's not the where you're looking focused on something in the middle. So I can look at somebody in the eye. I can read. I can use computers easily. But where my vision loss is on the outside. It's on the peripheral. So I am like looking down a pipe. Gus, why don't you tell us a little bit about your vision, and then we'll move on to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So yeah, it's very relevant that you mentioned the optic nerve and the electrical signals traveling from the eye to the brain through the optic nerve, because that's exactly the issue I have. It's part of my MS. MS is a neurological disease, and it affects the nerves in the central nervous system, and obviously the optic nerve is a very big one of those. And many people with MS have vision issues. They tend to be so it's actually an issue called optic neuritis, which stands for inflammation of the optic nerve. And in most MS patients, this tends to be a kind of transitory, episodic thing where you might have blurry vision for a few days, a few weeks. You might have some problems with contrast sensitivity. But there's a cohort of patients where the disease, where the optic nerve damage becomes more chronic, and they can develop lifelong irreversible problems. And unfortunately, I'm in that patient cohort. So I have actually I have a completely opposite pattern to what you have. So you described it as this kind of tunnel vision and being able to
Correct.
read and see computers. So I have the opposite. I have central field loss, which is a similar pattern to what a lot of people have in macular degeneration, where I can navigate around, so I don't fall downstairs, I don't bump into things, I can see the sort of sweep of the outside environment or indoor environment that I'm in, sort of pick up the components of a room or outside. But when it comes to things that I'm looking at directly, there's a central blind spot there. So when I go to use a computer, I have to use magnification, and I struggle to see people's faces that are talking to me unless they're standing very, very close to me. So everything has to be kind of zoomed in a way.
It's a perfect example of how we are literally completely opposite. You can see steps and handshakes. I can't, if I'm looking up, I can't see steps and I can't see handshakes, and I won't see people coming from the sides, but you will. It's fascinating how the eye can be so different. So appreciate that, Gus. So Gus, I understand that you are quite the huge football fan, or if you're listening from the States, soccer as we call it, although you guys have the correct name, by the way. It's football. But anyway, you are a huge football fan. So how, how and are you watching football? If you have a blind spot in the middle, are there modifications that you've had to make to watch or to be involved in your favorite game?
Oh well, very much so. So Kevin, I should probably add that I was diagnosed with MS at 26 years old. So prior to this age, I had no sight issues whatsoever. I'd never had so much as an eye test done, and never had any problems
Mm,
uh, at all with my sight. And so this was adjustment I had to make relatively young in life and relatively quickly.
right.
And yeah, I mean, so growing up and certainly in my mid 20s as well, I enjoyed football on two levels. I used to love going to the stadium and doing the whole match day experience. My father took me to my first game when I was 5 years old. And so, I think at that kind of age, these things become hardwired. And so I used to love doing that. But I also was very privileged to have an uncle who was a vice chairman so I'm a Chelsea fan, and he was vice chairman at Tottenham Hotspur, who are Chelsea's big London rivals. And because I had an uncle who was a director at a Premier League football club, I was privileged enough to go and see lots of games in the director's box there at Tottenham as well. But he could also get tickets to cup finals and all kinds of games as
And of
well.
course,
And
at this time, Gus, you have your full vision. I mean,
I
you
do,
can
yeah,
see
yeah, I
everything's
did.
clear, no blind spots. But then, 26 years old, what happens?
Well, yeah. So at 26 years old, well, actually it started when I was 25, but by the time I was 26, over a very short amount of time. This was actually before I'd had the formal diagnosis of MS, but I suspected I may have it. I started with a smaller, milder episode um, of optic neuritis, where I did have the more what I described at the beginning, the more the more kind of just issues with color sensitivity and
Hmm.
contrast and things like that. But this morphed into a more dramatic loss of central field. And this happened over a relatively short amount of time. I would say maybe over a 5 month period,
Wow.
where essentially I went from being a reasonably
Yeah,
well sighted person to somebody who had uh, central field loss. I mean, almost like somebody who had stable macular
sure.
disease. And yeah, that meant that the experience of going to watch football was just a no-no, because I would sit there and my scotoma would cover almost the entire pitch if you're seeing that far back. It didn't just impact me in terms of going to the actual stadium, but it also in terms of, because this is another passion of mine, watching football with friends.
Sure.
Same deal really.
Hmm.
You'd want to sit back on the sofa and watch the TV screen, but the TV screen would be covered by the scotoma. So even that was difficult. I was lucky to one extent. I was lucky in that I was able to quickly work out that if I sat very, very close to the TV and almost flooded all my vision field and used my remaining vision just with the TV screen, and no other visual noise or distractions, I could still follow the game. So that
Yes.
was a blessing. It wasn't totally removed from me.
I,
So
I understand what you're saying because even though our vision symptoms are opposite, I have to be a certain degree back from the TV or from a movie theater.
mm,
And if the TV is one of these, huge TVs that people have, like huge, it's almost too big. And sometimes having things on a smaller screen for me with my vision works better than a big screen. So it's strange.
yeah, I know that resonates with me completely actually, and I know that for certain activities, I find that for certain activities and certain things on TV, like particularly movies, one standard size of TV screen works, but
Yes.
then for other activities, um, a smaller size works. So for playing a computer game, for example, I'm much better off with a slightly smaller TV, but for a movie, I can sit a bit further back and it's a bigger screen. But to watch football, it still needs to be a relatively big screen, but sitting very, very, very close. So this for me also caused a degree of problems socially, because I wanted to continue to watch TV with my friends. I knew that there was a way of doing it,
Hmm.
unlike going to the stadium, which was completely certainly at the time that I was diagnosed, an impossibility.
Right. So
But
how did
yeah,
you do it with your friends? How, we want to be social, we want to be together, and especially since rates of receding into ourselves go up with vision loss. Like people tend to hide a little bit and become less sociable, and we want to try to avoid that. How did you, or what specific things did you do to still be able to hang out with your buddies and watch the game? What have you done?
well, I was in the process of moving into my own flat around the time that my vision loss started, and this still went ahead. So I kind of had a clean slate to design things in the way that I wanted, and I figured, okay, well, if me sitting so close to the screen means that it will block out the view of someone else, and I can't actually enjoy the game or anything else, indeed, with friends, or I would have to sit back, and then they could see it, but I couldn't. I thought why not have two? I thought why not have two screens going, and rather than have two TVs just in my living room, I thought I'd have a more discreet scenario where I put one big TV and mounted it on the wall with one of these. It was a big old plasma TV. This was back in 2005, so it was a
Sure.
big, those, remember those
Oh
heavy
yeah, I do.
plasma TV screens that was on
Absolutely.
this industrial strength arm mounted on the wall, but I could slide my legs directly underneath it and almost sit point blank. If I wanted to put my nose on the screen, I could. But the good thing with it having mounted like that is I didn't need to lean forward. So I had that in one corner, and I had adjacent to that, I had a projector on the wall, the wall opposite, projecting an image just to the side of the screen.
Yep.
So essentially, I had two feeds going on, and the good thing about having the projector is that when I didn't have friends around, I could just switch it off, and it was out the way,
Sure.
and it wasn't
You
taking up any
found a
room.
workaround, like and that's
Yeah, I would say so.
yeah. When you love something and you're passionate enough, you'll take those steps to get it done. In my case, my biggest hobby, passion, if you will, is music. It's always been music, but then playing. I'm a guitarist, so I've played guitar for 30 years or something, and I've been in all sorts of bands and rock bands, and I've played. Now, as my vision loss has gotten worse, and just so everyone knows, at night I can barely see. During day I can function sort of, but nighttime is brutal. And of course, clubs are dark and they're loud, and I'm wearing hearing protection. So I joke that I can't see or hear, and it becomes very difficult. But music and playing guitar is so important to me that I have developed modifications, including to my guitar, for probably 20 years now. I have numbers on the back of the neck where I put my hands to play guitar, on the back of the neck of the guitar, big numbers that tell me where I am. And in a dark stage, it helps. I have, of course, I don't drive. Well, I don't drive anymore, but at all. And I never driven at night. So bandmates always had to help me load up my gear. I had to use alternative lighting methods. Bring all sorts of different little lights and bigger lights that clip onto things. Not so much that it's really noticeable, but you want to make it so I can see. Because if I can't see the neck of the guitar, I can't really play very well. But it's so important to me, guitar playing, that I've over the years developed these things. And some have actually been incorporated by my normally sighted bandmates. They're like, this really helps me. And I'm like, good, well, you should do it then because it helps. So, right. So if you're passionate enough, Gus, you make the changes.
Push through,
don't
you? You just keep trying. It becomes a trial and error thing. You're passionate enough to recover the hobby, and so you'll just experiment, and you won't give up until you find a solution. I mean, do you find that when you talk about reading music, do you think that if you had the kind of sight loss that I've described, where there's significant problems with reading without magnification, that you would struggle, or do you think that you're maybe the sort of more tunnel vision type pattern you have means that you can actually read music?
But great question. So in my case, if I was a type of musician that played in a band where you're reading music along, like orchestra music or something,
Of course, yeah.
that would be very difficult. Now, doesn't mean it can't be done, but it would be very difficult. The kind of music I play, it's hard rock, and I've played the song so many times and practiced so much that
memory.
It's muscle memory. I'm not reading music during a show. But the problem is, most people can obviously see everything. So they're looking around and they're looking at the people dancing and the bar people over there and the bouncers and whatever. I'm not seeing that. I'm looking around like I'm looking down a toilet paper roll. So if I'm staring at the singer, someone could be trying to wave me down next to me, and I'm going to have no idea, which of course has led to a million embarrassing situations. But my bandmates are friends. They know, they're all aware. They know they can't try to wave me for something. They have to, they know I have to be looking right at their eyes to know that something's going on. And I've, there's been plenty of situations where things have happened and I just don't realize someone's standing next to me trying to get my attention because it's really dark. And but if I had to read music while playing, it would require some serious accessibility. It would.
It shows the difference in the different nature of the vision problems that people have, because you described that you struggle a lot with darkness, whereas actually I thrive in dimly lit environments and do much worse in very bright environments, because the glare outside seems to exacerbate that kind of blind spot. It seems to make it feel more raw and kind of exposes it almost more, whereas the softer light seems to soften the scotoma. So
that's
it's
so
just
interesting, Gus. So ironically, I can't see in the dark. However, I need tons of light, but however, I'm super light sensitive, which most patients with these inherited retinal diseases are. So it's like this thing where you're like, I need all the light I can get. However, it's so blinding to my eye that it can be damaging. Like I can't even function. If I walk outside from the house into a super sunny day, it's like whitewash. I almost can't see anything for a few minutes until my eyes sort of try to interpret the sunlight. So it is challenging. And I can't. That's great that you function better at night. All right. So yeah, music is my thing. Football is your thing. What else, Gus? Is there anything else that you have made modifications in your life to continue doing a passion? I think I heard you mention video games. How does that function? Playing video. I'm not a big video gamer, so I don't really know. So how does that work for you?
Well, yes, yes, Kevin. I definitely, certainly, if I'm referring back to the age I was when I was diagnosed with MS, I did in those days enjoy playing video games with friends. And it was kind of a social activity. And actually, this is one of those things where I guess sometimes one has to be a bit inventive and almost a bit ruthless as well with the adaptations you make. I figured quite soon after I started having the vision problems and playing video games that I would function at the game worse than I was, even if I was quite close to the screen. I would function at the game worse than I was when I was completely sighted, and I began to not like the fact that people that would sort of beat me in the past when I was sighted at the video game would even more roundly beat me, and those who I would usually be able to beat started to be able to beat me as well. And I got to the point where I just thought, I don't like this because it's reminding me of how things used to be, but I still enjoyed playing the game. So I kind of kept it more. I kept it more as a solitary thing, and just because you can't get angry at the computer so much. So I would sit there and I'd play on the PlayStation by myself. And so I think it's this is just a psychology thing with me. Maybe some other people would kind of be more relaxed about it and think, oh, it doesn't matter who, at least we're playing together. Interestingly enough, I think that I'd probably be quite happy. I haven't done it yet because kind of other things in life have taken over, and I'm always busy with different things. But I think I'd probably be quite happy hopping online and playing some random person from across the world who I didn't know at all. Because if they beat me, I'd probably sort of justify it to myself that they were some South Korean esports champion and I wouldn't have beaten them anyway. But it's just when I was playing those friends where I had a kind of, I knew how good they were and whether I should be beating them or not be beating them. And it would annoy me if I thought if I could blame it on my sight impairment. And I guess that cycles back to also what we were saying about watching football. It's this kind of, because I mean, there are, without going to too much details, there are some quite exciting new technologies emerging now where people with sight loss can wear something, and it's almost like a head-worn CCTV. So it's using a camera, but it's kind of mounted into can be like more like a spectacles, but usually it's more like kind of VR headset format. And you can go and you can watch, see things from better distance. And
hey, Gus, let's use that as a teaser for another episode where we're going to feature technology. Like, we'll focus on it. But you're right. There is these technologies that they don't work for my vision loss as much, but I understand for your type of vision loss, they do work really well.
Yeah, if you've got this kind of if you've got this background in doing something a certain way,
Yeah.
and a benchmark of doing it in the sighted
Mm-hmm.
way, so those things work okay
There you go.
for watching football, but it's not quite the same. So
Mm-hmm.
it's making those modifications, but being a bit ruthless with it. And
There
I
you go.
suppose yeah, I suppose the other hobby, the other thing, if we're talking about strictly vision related stuff,
Mm-hmm.
that was a loss for me, is going to the cinema. And I don't know if you agree with me, Kevin, but if you, I mean, I grew up in the 1980s, and when you grow up in this kind of time, it's not it's not like the kids that of today that have
No.
these amazing computer consoles, plus they have 100 TV channels and Netflix and Amazon Prime at their disposal. So the cinema, when you're a kid in that time, is quite a big social thing, isn't it? You go, and it's a main way to kind of meet friends and stuff like that. And again, I am able to go to the
Mm-hmm.
cinema with my sight loss. If I sit at the front, I can follow at least the kind of outline of the movie and stuff. I might again miss kind of slight vision cues like expression on actors'
Yeah.
faces,
But
but you
see,
get to a
with
point.
you sit close, like you mentioned about the
I do,
TV.
yeah.
So I once, I was in with one of my brothers in another state, and we went to see this movie, and we were like the last people to get tickets. So we were literally in the front row of this huge theater, and so the screen was not far from our faces. Now, to me, I saw nothing of the movie. It was so close that it doesn't work for my vision. I have to be
Ah,
like midway back to get all of it into my middle vision.
of course.
Like, everyone's enjoying this movie and having a great time. And at the end, I thought, I don't really see much of it at all, actually. So it was just, oh man, it's so interesting how people and our eyes interpret things differently based on our vision loss, And so thinking about that, I was just thinking as you were talking about how there's different hobbies. Okay, right. So there's hobbies that we can do still, maybe even without modification. Like me talking into this microphone now, I can pretty much do that without any modifications. Then there's these hobbies that we do with modifications, like you watching football, me playing the guitar. And then unfortunately, there are hobbies that we can still do, but I believe, this is my personal opinion, that they require such modification or such engagement with other people that maybe we don't do them anymore. And for me, there's like scuba diving. I love scuba diving. I've scuba dived all over the world, but as my vision loss has gotten worse, scuba diving has dropped away because scuba diving is a 360-degree visual experience. It's not just straight ahead or even behind you. It's up, down, it's every way. And I had some experiences diving, and people didn't know about my vision loss, and they're trying to get your attention underwater, which is very important. And I couldn't do it. And I don't have somebody that I'm partnered up with that loves to scuba dive and knows all about me, and we go all over the world. It's not that. So scuba diving has kind of fallen off for me. Downhill skiing. I used to downhill ski all the time. Now, could I do it? Sure. Do I want to? No, because I think I could get hurt and it would employ other people, and I just don't want to put the burden on people. So we have these things we do that we can do with modification, or maybe it just requires too much to do. And then there's those that we can't do at all. And there are some things, for example, you mentioned it, driving. And in another episode, we're going to go into this more in depth, but I gave up driving a bunch of years ago after a long time driving. And it definitely, the transportation issue is one that, is hard to get around. But obviously we can't drive when we can't see very well. What do you think, Gus?
Well, I guess I also think that, though our hobbies and passions might stay the same, time moves on, technology also moves on,
Mm-hmm.
and the kind of, we all live in a society, and we have those downward pressures on us too, and we react to that. So just like I said about going to the cinema in the 80s, and that being a huge thing, and may have been a huge loss for me had I
Yeah.
lost my sight in the 1980s. Nowadays we have all these different platforms to watch all kinds of movies and
Right.
all kinds of films. All kind of people have multiple subscriptions nowadays. So yes, it's still nice going to the cinema and the kind of day out and the sound effects and all that. But we have those options. We can fall back on which didn't exist before. So yes, I agree that each one of us have to kind of work out where it's worth drawing our personal line and saying, hey, this isn't worth doing anymore. And like in the example of going to football matches, I occasionally go and I use an electronic wearable to watch matches, but I also acknowledge that it's not necessarily there's not a safety issue, but it's not as good as doing it. It's not as easy as it used to be, and therefore I'll do it and there's issues with the kind of transportation and getting there, but I'll do it from time to time just to remind myself of the match day experience. But I'm lucky, in a sense, that nowadays, just like the movies, sports are on TV all the time, and that wasn't the case 20 or 30 years ago. So we should appreciate the kind of technological age that we live in. I mean, I guess it's like the pandemic, isn't it, Kevin?
Yes.
Had this happened, had coronavirus, COVID-19 been COVID 1975 or COVID 75 or whatever, what would people have done? What would have happened with working from home and all this stuff? But technology allows us to pivot. So I think we should appreciate the age we live in too.
That's well said, Gus. I mean, it's about appreciation. It really is. And, when I give, really quickly, I give talks on the side about living a successful life with low vision. And I sometimes it's not a joke, I just make the comment that it's kind of a good time to have vision loss. Because like you said, if it was 1975 or 1875 or 1775, we wouldn't be able to do anything. We'd be outcasts. And it is
even with better vision than we have today,
right? We would be thought of as sick or diseased or something, and
that's it.
And yet we can really live a full life. And as we wrap up, that's kind of my message. Appreciation, like you said, it's about recognizing the blessings and that, everyone has something wrong with them, some worse than others, but it's about modifying your life, pivoting. You use the word pivot. That's a great word, pivot. To adjust your life to the things you want to do. And that's kind of my message as we close out here. Any final thoughts before we give out our email addresses and stuff? Anything to say, Gus?
Well, no, just to echo what you say, what you've said, for anyone sort of starting to live with sight loss now, there are still things that you can do. There are still options. As you explained with your experience with the band, persistence and experimentation go a long way. With disabilities, there can be sort of extra costs involved, and there can be lots more trial and error than there would be. But stick with it, persist, because
that's right.
There's often a way, even if you can't see it straight off.
Yes,
you'll find it eventually.
You will find a way. Gus, I really want to thank you for taking the time to join me. And I'm looking forward to doing more of these on really specific topics that you and I know about. We want to spread the word. For me, everyone, you can find what I'm up to at the webpage kevinmcnally.us. That's kevinmcnally.us. Or you can email me at kevin@kevinmcnally.us. How about you, Gus? Any contact information you'd like to share?
You can read the articles that I post on Forbes at my main Forbes page, and the web address for that would be www.forbes.com/sites/Gus Alexiou, which is GUSALEXIOU, and there's usually an article every week going up on there about all kinds of things related to disability, and a lot of stuff on sight loss too.
That's great. I'll put your information up on my webpage as well so people can find it nice and easy. Again, Gus, thank you so much. I really appreciated it. And everyone, thank you for listening.
Wonderful to talk to you, Kevin. Thank you.
Take care. It's